Ecclesiastes 9:9 says, "Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun." Now, I see several things here. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love. This doesn't say live joyfully with your wife if you happen to love her. It doesn't say live joyfully with your wife if she happens to be a particularly lovable person, or if you married the right person. I think what this is saying is love your wife. Love your wife, live joyfully with her. And my experience, having dealt with an awful lot of men over the years, is that, and Brother David says this, love is a choice. You know, if you go into a marriage and your attitude is, well, if this one doesn't work out, I'll dump her and get another one, well, probably isn't going to work out. If you go into that marriage with the attitude is, this is the one woman God has given me, and the one woman God is going to give me, and I am going to make the absolute most of this. I'm going to love her with everything I have, regardless. There are no alternatives. Then my experience is that marriage ends up being a solid, long-lasting, faithful, joy-filled marriage. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life. When we are living right with God, when we have the right attitude towards this life, when we have an eternal attitude towards this life, one of our rewards for that should be, unless we choose not to be married for the sake of the kingdom, should be a joyful marriage, a home that's filled with joy because of our relationship with our wife, whether we're poor or rich. Living in the same house with somebody that we love, with our best friend, with somebody that just brings us joy, is our portion of life. And he has given it to us. For that is your portion of life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. That's one of the rewards for working, for earning, we call it earning a living, but for not being lazy and for providing for our family in accordance with the Word of God, is that we're able to provide for a wife and live together with her. And again, if we have a godly marriage and a godly attitude towards that marriage, then that's going to be a source of joy in our lives. And the Bible tells us to take joy in that. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love. Verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. So this very much reminds me, should remind all of us, of the 3rd chapter of Colossians. I'm going to read it. Colossians 3:23 says, "And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ." Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Everything we do, we should be doing because God has arranged it for us, whether it's our day job, whether it's the way we take care of our home, whether it's the way we worship, whether it's what we contribute to the work of the kingdom and the church. Everything we do, in fact, I didn't read Colossians 3:17, but it says, everything you do in word or in deed, do it as unto the Lord. And Solomon is telling us the same thing. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with your might. There's no point in applying yourself to doing something halfway. Whether you have a job at McDonald's, whether you have a job working for the state, whether you have a job pouring concrete, whatever your job is, there's no point, there's no profit in not doing it to the best of your ability, and it reflects poorly on us claiming to be a Christian if we do a job halfway. Brother David spilled some concrete one time and found that out.
I thought you were a Christian.
For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. And all he's simply saying is, this is your opportunity. You know, you're going to stand in front of the judgment seat of God one of these days, and every opportunity you had to do your job well, to treat your wife well, to manage your home well, to be a blessing to your employer, to be a blessing to your community, to be a blessing to the flock, that's come and gone. You had your chance. And we should live every day with that in mind, that this is our opportunity. This is our one and only opportunity to do those things that we can only do in this life. This is our only opportunity to be a blessing to those who live with us in Red Rock, in Texas, and our families, wherever they're spread out to. And we should take advantage of that and do that with all of our strength. Verse 11, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happen to them all. Just another way of stating that life is not fair. We think that the race should be to the swift, and the battle should belong to the strong. That makes sense. That makes statistical sense to us. But that's not always the way it happened. Time happens to all. We all enter our prime. We all pass our prime. We all reach that point that God has appointed for us to die. That happens to us all. And chance happens to us all. Now we certainly don't believe in luck. And we certainly don't believe that God doesn't know what's going on, but if we were having this meeting in Afghanistan right now, our circumstances and our chances and our opportunities and our situation would be very, 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 very different. Chance simply means that there are things that are going to affect your ability. They're going to affect your options. They're going to affect your opportunities that you have no control over. We have no control over the value of the dollar. We have no control over the weather. We have no control over where we're born and when we are born. And like I said, if God had arranged that we were in Afghanistan right now, that is from our perspective, it's a chance. Now, God's not a surprise to God, but there are things that affect who the race is to, and who the battle to is, and who the bread is to, and who riches are to. There are things that affect that are beyond our control. For man also does not know his time.
Isn't that good?
That is good. That is very, very good. Rahana and I were out on Highway 71. It was after the pandemic was well underway last year, and we had come from the colony and had crossed the divided highway and had just pulled into the median when we heard screeching tires behind us, and I looked in my rearview mirror just in time to see an 18-wheeler plow into a little Toyota. And we pulled over into the median and got out, and I started directing traffic, and Rahana started helping the lady who was driving. Her father was riding shotgun, and that impact I don't know if it snapped his neck or if it ruptured in something internally, but he was in his 40s and he died on the scene. Died on the scene. They had gone down to, they were sick and tired of sheltering in place in Austin. Like I say, it was early in the pandemic, and they had just jumped in the car on a whim and driven down to Corpus Christi just to get out of the house, and were driving back. And she slowed down, and the 18-wheeler behind her did not slow down, and her dad died on the spot. That can happen to any of us. We do not know our time. And so we need to, the more we remember that we don't know our time, and the more, I mean, I see these bumper stickers and these little sayings that say, live each day as if it were your last day. And I'm not sure that's quite right either, but we need to live each day understanding that this is the only, what is the day? The 22nd? August 20, this is the only August 22nd, 2021 we're ever going to have. Whatever happens today, it brings us one day closer to that day when God's going to call us before the judgment seat. Man does not know his time, like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. This verse reminds me of one of my favorite verses over in the book of Ephesians. So I'm going to turn to it and read it. I think it's very, very relevant. I think it very much parallels what Solomon is telling us. This is Ephesians, the 5th chapter, starting in verse 15. The Word of God says, "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another in the fear of God." Redeeming the time because the days are evil. And we see all through the Bible that the days are evil. When I put all of the evil days together, my conclusion is that we've been living in an evil time ever since Eve disobeyed God, and we'll be living in an evil time until Christ returns. The fact is that the majority of people around us are of the world. They aren't necessarily wicked people in the sense that we think of people being wicked, but as Jesus says, the one who is not for me is against me. The one who does not gather with me scatters abroad. And that is our surroundings. If you look at television or look at the billboards or just listening to what's going on in conversations around us at Walmart or at work, we live in a very worldly, fleshly, evil time. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls suddenly upon them. We live in a sin-filled world, and many spirit-filled, born-again Christians have died when somebody drunk coming the other way has swerved over into their lane and hit them head on. We don't know why that happens. What we know is that God's ways are higher than our ways. We should have read that this last week, that His thoughts are higher than our thoughts and His ways are higher than our ways. And what's the worst that could happen to us if our name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life? I don't know what the worst is, but the best is that we could go home. That we could go home. Verse 13, "This wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me, There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it, besieged it, and built great snares around it. Now there was found in it a poor, wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that same poor man. Why did they not remember him? Because it was poor, and because the world, for whatever reason, places such tremendous value on people who have wealth, people who have made a name for themselves, people of means. We seem to think, or the world certainly believes, that people who have succeeded, who have prospered, who have become wealthy, are worth knowing, are worth fellowshipping with, are worth remembering. And people who are poor, people who are destitute, people who are lowly, people who are particularly humble, people who are homeless, people who are in jail, are not, don't deserve the same respect. It's just the opposite of what the Bible tells us, but then again, the world is just the opposite. That's why to be a friend with the world is to be an enemy of God's. Ecclesiastes 9:16. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise, spoken quietly, should be heard, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. I know Brother David is a student of military strategy, and I'm certainly not to the extent he is, but I think of battles. I think of the Battle of San Jacinto, where 800 or 900 ill-trained, ill-armored Texans routed an army of Mexican soldiers twice their size, well-drilled, well-trained, well-armed.
I don't remember how many minutes it was, but it wasn't very long, like 31 minutes.
It was 19 minutes before the army had completely turned and was completely routed, and it was because it was a tiny strategy decision, which was a full frontal attack in the middle of the day when Santa Anna he just couldn't even imagine that bunch of inferior would attack in the middle of the day.
They knew that they were out there.
And they knew they were out there. They knew they were all right there. They'd been stood off against each other for 24 hours, and so they had their rifles all stacked up. They were all standing down. They were all They were. And that's just an example, but the fact is that strategy has a lot more to do than armament and power and battle and numbers. And the flip side of that is that one sinner destroys much good. And I'm reminded of, I preached a message a couple months ago on the 7th chapter of Joshua, where the Israelite army got routed by a very small band of guys defending the city of Ai, because Achan had defied the Lord and taken of the accursed things from Jericho, and as a result, 36 men lost their lives. The army was routed, and the whole campaign against the Canaanites was set back. In most countries, in most conflicts, being a traitor is a capital crime. Why? Because one person crossing the lines and saying, hey, here's where they're encamped, hey, here's where they're planning to march, can destroy, literally can turn the entire battle, can turn the war. And in most of history, if somebody was found to be a traitor, they were promptly hanged or promptly shot or promptly had their head cut off or promptly executed. One sinner destroys much good. The same can be said about a church, a flock of people. one person either willfully or foolishly can precipitate conflict and divisiveness and can compromise the work being done by an entire body. One sinner destroys much good. So we just need to be so careful, always that we are not that one sinner. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And this is a series of, they all relate to the theme of this book, but it's a series of proverbs. We're going to jump into a series of proverbs now. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. It doesn't matter how great a reputation and how well-deserved a reputation we build up. We only have to do one stupid thing for people to suddenly, for it to completely compromise our reputation, to compromise our testimony. The work my program does for the state is so mission sensitive that when I hire somebody into the program, I tell them right up front, you need to understand you can do 99 things perfectly and one thing wrong, and the only thing that you're going to get noticed for and going to get called on the carpet about is that one thing wrong you do, because everything we do is mission sensitive and mission critical, and we don't get a pat on the back every time we do something right. The expectation is that we do every single thing right, but you will get called out and you will get chewed out and reprimanded if you do one thing wrong, because that one thing wrong is going to have a domino effect and is going to cost us a contract or cost us a transaction or going to cost us a political relationship, right or wrong. Well, and I think of the number of I'm going to use the word churches with a lowercase c, the number of flourishing ministries that have come crashing down because the pastor made a really poor choice and got caught. Or I know of a church in my hometown where the assistant pastor stood up one day and confessed in public in the church that he was having an affair with a lady in the choir whose husband was a prominent member of the church, and that church came apart at the seams.
Yeah, I would have exited stage left about that time. Yeah, I'm gonna figure this out.
So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's at his left. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. And I'm not going to delve deep into that, but we know that a fool is known by his many words, and that a fool, when he keeps quiet, is thought wise. We really display who we are by how we act and how we speak, and if we're prone to feeling like we have to always say something in every situation, whether we know much about it or not, it won't take long for us to get a reputation for being a fool. 10:4, if the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offenses. I was talking about my work earlier, and this hasn't happened often, but 2 or 3 times in my career I've dropped a ball. I've done it more than that, but I've dropped a ball and it's come to the attention of my executive director, and I have been chewed out by my executive director. The best thing I can do is go about my work and do it to the best of my ability and do it consistently, and pretty soon he forgets that he was ever upset with me. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, continue to do your job and do it to the best of your ability. For conciliation pacifies great offenses. When my boss looks down and sees that I am good at what I do, that God has called me to do what I'm doing, and despite my chewing out, despite the fact that in his eyes I dropped a ball last week, I am still at my post, I'm still doing my job, I'm still doing it to the best of my ability, then that smooths that incident over. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants. Again, Solomon has seen that life is unfair. Folly set in great dignity. There are a number of passages that talk about what becomes of a household or what becomes of a nation when we call good bad and bad good. When we call wrong right and right wrong. When we call light darkness and darkness light. And for some reason right now I can't think of a good example, but there's a number of verses that talk about how evil it is, and how evil will never leave a home, it will never leave a nation when that nation calls evil good and good evil, when folly is set in great dignity, when people look up to people who are espousing foolishness and put them on a pedestal and worship that and believe that and abide by that, and that's what rules that country or rules that household or rules that flock, is something that is foolish. And it happens. It happens frequently. We don't need to spend a lot of time going into examples. We all can think of plenty of examples of that. Verse 8, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. So again, another proverb, but wisdom gets us through all of life's activities, all of life's responsibilities, all of life's challenges much easier, much more quickly. What he's saying here is that a wise man, if he's chopping wood, is going to keep the blade of his axe sharp. A lazy man's not going to, he's just going to keep working harder and harder and harder.
Where his fingers are, his hands are.
Where his feet are. And where that wood is going to fly when it splits.
Which way you're swinging that axe?
Which way, who's
chopping wood for the fire, and he comes over there at the pit or something, he's over here, put that axe facing toward me. I'm like, well, turn around, face that axe the other way. Chop that wood going that way, bud.
Yeah, even, what is it, Leviticus maybe, that talks about the axe head flying off the handle and killing your...
You're going to have to flee to another city, man. Turn around.
That's right, and it's not that you did it willfully, but you probably did it stupidly if you were swinging that axe in such a way that and you know, they make axes pretty good these days, but I've had axe heads fly off before. You know, those old wooden handled with the wedge driven in the end, and sooner or later that wood gets dry enough and shrinks enough that wedge, you know, you smack that head enough times to loosen it up, and that head comes off. But a wise person is going to be attentive to those things, is going to pay attention to those things, is going to keep that axe sharp, and is going to do less work and safer work. And that's just an example. And that's worldly wisdom. But I think what we're seeing here is that even worldly wisdom is a gift from God. We certainly know that godly wisdom, that wisdom in our faith, wisdom in our doctrine is a gift from God. But worldly wisdom, having enough sense and having enough, I don't know what the opposite of lazy is, but being attentive enough and focused enough to be mindful of your work, to be mindful of your tools, to be mindful of those around you, is going to result in a better job and a safer job and less work and more reward for your effort than being lazy, than being careless in our work. And that's a gift from God, and we should seek it and receive it.